The revelation came quietly, wrapped in a neighbor's concerned voice. Helen showed up one afternoon, her expression grave. She set her coffee down on my kitchen table and leaned closer. Dorothy, I had my cousin at the county clerk's office run a search. Jennifer isn't just cheating. She's married to Marcus Davidson. 6 months ago. In Las Vegas. The words hit like a hammer, though I kept my face steady. She's already married to my son. Helen nodded slowly. Bigamy. A federal crime. And there's more. Marcus has been transferring assets into her name. Property, bank accounts, even shares of his company. She's been draining him while living under your roof. For a moment, the kitchen felt colder, as if the truth itself had stolen the warmth from the air. I exhaled carefully, my mind already assembling pieces into a case. Michael needs to hear this. And so do the police. By evening, the storm had broken. Patrol cars lined Jennifer's temporary apartment, blue and red lights flashing against the windows. Neighbors stood gawking as officers led her out in handcuffs. Her designer coat no protection against humiliation. Marcus followed soon after, his wrists bound, his eyes hollow. Michael came to me that night, pale and silent. He stood in the doorway, watching the news replay on my television. There she was, his wife, the woman he once defended, being pushed into a cruiser. Was any of it real? He whispered. I laid a hand on his arm. She showed you who she was, Michael. Believe her. Weeks later, in a federal courtroom packed with victims, the prosecutor read out the charges: bigamy, tax evasion, wire fraud. 7 families defrauded. Over $2 million stolen. Jennifer sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her arrogance finally stripped away. Marcus looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, a man who had gambled everything and lost. When the judge sentenced Jennifer to 8 years in prison and Marcus to 4, the room exhaled. Sarah Davidson, Marcus's ex-wife, turned to me afterward, gratitude softening her features. Your evidence helped bring them down. You gave me back my dignity. I nodded. Sometimes the only way to protect what's ours is to stop pretending kindness will change people. Some people take kindness as permission. Overly. R. Ren. Jacom. R. Enery. Nat. 3 months later, the house was quiet again. Michael had moved into his own apartment across town, beginning the long process of rebuilding. I sat alone in my sunroom one morning, coffee warm in my hands, the deed to the house resting in a drawer nearby. Outside, the roses bloomed again, red and defiant against the spring air. Jennifer once asked me how it felt to be a loser. I smiled into my cup. The answer, I realized, was simple. Losers don't hold deeds. Losers don't watch the people who mocked them led away in chains. Losers don't sit in their own homes, free and unbowed, with peace as their only companion. Kindness without boundaries is weakness. But I am no one's doormat. Not anymore. The truth is, Hannah's cutting remark on that December afternoon didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the natural consequence of years in which I allowed my sacrifices to become their entitlement. It began innocently enough. A phone call one evening from Daniel, his voice tight. Mom, I hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a bind. Property taxes are higher than we expected, and Hannah just signed the papers on her new car. Could you help? I remember clutching the receiver, staring at the photograph of James on the wall, the man who had worked himself into exhaustion to give us stability. I thought, what would he do? He'd protect his son, of course. And so I said yes. I always said yes. $5,000. That was the first withdrawal, taken from my savings account. Money I had been slowly collecting for a future condo. It felt like only a temporary measure. I told myself, once Daniel gets promoted, Once Hannah settles into her new position, they'll pay me back. But the pattern became clear. A few months later, it was the air conditioning unit. Then it was hardwood floors. Apparently, the shade of oak didn't match Hannah's aesthetic. It's just until we're back on our feet, Daniel would assure me, his words polished with the confidence of someone who had never truly felt the cost of money. Meanwhile, my own home told a very different story. The kitchen faucet dripped for weeks because I couldn't afford a plumber. The car skipped routine maintenance. I prayed each morning that it would start. While their living room was redecorated with designer furniture, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches at midnight in my aging kitchen, counting dollars like a woman half my age. The mortgage was the final blow. Daniel came to me, his wedding ring clicking nervously against the kitchen table I had bought decades ago. "Mom, the payment's too high. The interest rate jumped. We just need help until things even out." "How far behind are you?" I asked. 3 months, he admitted. Eyes lowered. I should have said no. Should have reminded him he was a grown man, married, with responsibilities. But instead, I heard James's voice in my head again. "Take care of him, Karen. He's all we have." So, I agreed. I picked up extra shifts at 60 years old, dragging my tired body through overnight rotations, so my son and his wife could keep their dream home. 3 months turned into 3 years. Every 30 days, I wired money directly into their account. My retirement fund dwindled. My health deteriorated. And somewhere along the way, gratitude disappeared. The Sunday dinners became monthly. Phone calls grew shorter. Hannah stopped, even pretending to ask about my life. One night, as I stood in their gleaming kitchen, admiring the new sectional, Hannah boasted about, "It's from a designer showroom in the city, Mom. We deserve to splurge." I felt my cheeks burn. She was sitting on luxury I had bought, while I couldn't replace the worn-out mattress in my own bedroom. That was the first time I allowed myself to whisper the truth I had been afraid to face. I wasn't helping anymore. I was enabling. Tanned. Surely my own son would care more about my health than a piece of property. The next morning I called. Hannah answered. "Karen," she said coolly. "Daniel's in a meeting. Can I take a message?" "It's important," I replied, my voice rasping. "I've been put on medical leave. Pneumonia. I won't be able to cover your mortgage for a month or 2. You'll need to manage it yourselves." Silence. Then a short, dismissive laugh. "So you're saying you won't send the money this month?" Her tone made it sound like an overdue bill, not a lifeline I had been providing for years. "I can't," I said quietly. "The doctor insists I rest." I thought, "We're counting on that money, Karen," she snapped, cutting me off. "We already booked our ski trip for Christmas." The phone trembled in my hand. "You have money for a vacation, but not for your own mortgage?" Her voice turned sharp, almost mocking. "Don't try to use your health as leverage. You wanted to be part of our lives. This was your choice." I sat frozen, listening to the hum of the dial tone after she hung up. For the first time, I realized Hannah had never seen my help as sacrifice. To her, it was obligation. Expected. Daniel called days later. His voice rushed, distracted. "Mom, Hannah told me about your little situation. Look, I'm sorry you're not feeling well, but we really need that payment. We're hosting a pre-Christmas dinner for her colleagues, and the new dining set arrives next week. Could you at least send half?" Half. After 3 years of draining myself dry, after nights spent hunched over in the ER, fighting to stay awake, fighting to stay alive. He wanted half. I gripped the phone, my voice steadier than I felt. "Don't bother, Daniel. Not this month. Not ever again." For a moment, there was silence. Then his sigh, heavy with annoyance, not concern. "You're being dramatic, Mom. But fine. We'll figure it out ourselves. When the line went dead, I knew something inside me had shifted permanently. The pneumonia had broken my body, but their words had broken the illusion I'd been clinging to for years. The first thing I did after hanging up that call was simple. I walked to my desk, opened the old leather-bound planner James had given me years ago, and wrote in block letters across the mortgage due date, "Stop. No more excuses. No more justifications." I called the bank the next morning and canceled the automatic transfer. When the woman on the line asked if I was sure, my chest tightened, but my voice stayed firm. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." The silence that followed felt like both a collapse and a release. For 3 years, I had been the invisible scaffolding, holding up a house that wasn't mine. Now, I was letting it fall. It didn't take long for the fallout to arrive. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at my front door. His car parked crookedly against the curb, his jaw set. He didn't knock politely, he pounded. I opened the door to find him standing there, shoulders squared, anger radiating off him. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" "The bank says the payment didn't come through." I stepped aside, gesturing him in. "It didn't," I said calmly. "I told Hannah, I can't keep doing this." Inside, he paced my living room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair. "Do you understand what this means? We're already behind. If the bank reports this," I cut him off. "What it means, Daniel, is that you and Hannah need to start paying your own bills. I've covered you for years. I nearly worked myself into the grave to keep that house standing. And what did I get in return? A phone call telling me I wasn't welcome for Christmas." His face flushed. "That was Hannah's idea, not mine." "But you let her say it," I snapped. The words came sharper than I intended, but I didn't take them back. "You stood there and let her carve me out of your life like I was nothing." He stopped pacing then, his eyes narrowing. "You're overreacting. We needed your help. You're our mother." "Isn't that what family does?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The boy who once hugged me after graduation and whispered, "I couldn't have done it without you," was gone. In his place stood a man who measured love in dollars. I shook my head slowly. "Family doesn't drain each other dry, Daniel. Family doesn't treat sacrifice as obligation. I won't be your bank anymore." His lips pressed into a thin line. "Fine. We'll figure it out ourselves. But don't expect to be part of our lives if you're going to abandon us like this." The word abandon hung in the air like poison. He stormed out before I could respond, the slam of the door rattling the picture frames on my wall. I stood there in the quiet, staring at a photo of James holding baby Daniel in his arms. For years, I had believed that protecting my son meant giving him everything. But now I understood the truth. Sometimes protecting someone means forcing them to stand without you. I picked up the crumpled mortgage notice from the counter, tore it in half, and dropped it in the trash. The sound was small, almost nothing, but to me, it was thunder. It was a week before Christmas when the knock came. Not Daniel this time. He would have stormed in with accusations. This knock was precise, measured, almost courteous. When I opened the door, Walter Jackson, Hannah's father, stood on my porch. His cashmere coat looked as if it had never known a wrinkle, his leather gloves perfectly creased. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said stiffly. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, though every instinct screamed not to. He entered my modest living room and surveyed it the way a jeweler examines a counterfeit stone. He didn't sit until I motioned to the sofa. Even then, he perched on the edge, as if afraid the fabric might cling to his status. "I understand," he began, folding his gloved hands. That you've decided to withdraw your financial support for Daniel and Hannah's household. His tone made it sound like a breach of contract, rather than a mother reclaiming her life. I've decided to prioritize my own health and retirement, I corrected, keeping my voice steady. Walter's mouth tightened. Be that as it may, your decision has placed them in considerable distress. The timing is particularly unfortunate. With the holidays approaching, they have obligations, social obligations that must be met. Your sudden withdrawal creates difficulties that ripple outward. Social obligations, the words curdled in my stomach. They weren't worried about keeping the lights on, only about keeping up appearances. What exactly are you asking me, Mr. Jackson? He leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing. A compromise. If you would resume the mortgage payments temporarily just until the new year, it would give them time to make other arrangements. Consider it a grace period. I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. And why would I do that? He reached into his coat, withdrew a checkbook, and uncapped an elegant pen. Because I'm prepared to compensate you for the inconvenience. Think of it as a consulting fee, a simple business arrangement. For a moment, I could only stare. The man had come into my home, not to offer help to his daughter, but to bribe me into continuing a role I never should have played in the first place. You want to pay me? I said slowly. So I can keep paying your daughter's mortgage? Precisely, he replied smoothly, as if it were the most logical solution in the world. Something inside me hardened. Mr. Jackson, if you're concerned about Daniel and Hannah's financial situation, perhaps you should support them directly. They are your family, after all. His brows shot up, genuine surprise flickering in his eyes. That's not how we do things. We believe in financial independence. The irony nearly choked me. Financial independence propped up by a 62-year-old widow working herself ill. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. Then it's time your daughter and my son learned what true independence looks like. I will not be resuming those payments. Walter rose as well, stiff, affronted. Hannah was right, he muttered. Your attitude is precisely why, including you, in our gatherings, has always been awkward. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and met his gaze squarely. Merry Christmas, Mr. Jackson. He left without returning the sentiment. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. Outside, the wind howled through the bare branches. Inside, for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. After Walter stormed out, my house fell into a silence so deep it almost hummed. For years, that silence had felt like loneliness, a reminder that Daniel rarely visited, that Hannah never called unless she wanted something. But now it felt open, like space, waiting to be filled. Grace Thompson, my retired teacher friend, had been pestering me for years to join her volunteer group at the community center. That week, I finally said yes. The first evening I walked into the center, the smell of roasted turkey and mashed potatoes greeted me. They were preparing meals for seniors who had no family to visit during the holidays. Karen! Grace beamed, her arms outstretched. You came. I slipped on an apron, and within minutes, I was stirring gravy, surrounded by laughter and the clatter of serving trays. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what I could give in dollars. My worth was measured by the warmth of a smile, the steadiness of my hands. Then came Olivia Walsh, my neighbor across the street. We had always exchanged polite nods. But one night, I found myself knocking on her door. Your Christmas lights are beautiful, I told her. Would you help me put some up on my house? Her face lit up. Of course. Frank always did ours. But after he passed, I learned myself. Come over. We'll make cocoa. and draw a plan. Um, that evening we sat at her kitchen table sketching how to outline my little house with white lights. By the time I walked home, Coco warming me from the inside, I realized I had discovered something I thought I'd lost forever. Friendship. And then there was Nathan Reed. Dr. Reed, as I had always called him, the hospital's chief of medicine. We had worked side by side for years, his steady presence guiding me through endless overnight shifts. Now on medical leave, I bumped into him in the hallway. "You're looking better," he said, concern softening his sharp features. "Are you ready to come back?" "Not the night shifts," I admitted. I was hoping for something lighter. Administrative, maybe. He smiled. "I'll see what I can arrange. And, if you're free Saturday, there's a string quartet at the university. Would you like to come?" The question stunned me. It had been decades since anyone invited me anywhere that wasn't about obligation. I almost said no out of habit. But instead, I heard myself reply, "I'd love to." That Saturday, as the music rose around us, I let myself sink into the sound. For 90 minutes, I wasn't the mother who had been excluded from Christmas, or the woman who had worked herself into pneumonia. I was simply Karen, sitting beside a man with kind eyes, allowing myself to feel alive. When Nathan walked me to my door and said, "You look beautiful tonight," I felt a blush creep across my cheeks. It had been years since I'd blushed. Inside, the little Christmas tree I'd placed in my front window glowed softly. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own life. It was the last thing I expected. A call from Hannah. She rarely spoke to me directly, preferring to filter everything through Daniel, but her voice on the line was different. Tight, hurried, almost trembling. "Karen, can we meet?" "Not at the house. Somewhere private. Please." Curiosity mixed with dread as I agreed. We met at a cafe on Main Street, the place buzzing with holiday shoppers seeking refuge from the cold. Hannah was already there, sitting in the corner, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her. For the first time since I'd known her, the immaculate confidence was gone. Shadows bruised the skin beneath her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, motioning for me to sit. "Daniel doesn't know I'm here. I'd prefer it stays that way." I folded my hands in my lap. "What's going on, Hannah?" She glanced around, lowering her voice. "I need to ask you something. And I need honesty. Did you know about the gambling?" The word hit me like ice water. "Gambling?" I repeated. She searched my face, then exhaled in relief. "You didn't know. God, I thought maybe you were covering for him." "Hannah, what are you talking about?" My voice shook despite myself. She leaned closer, eyes glistening. "Daniel has a gambling problem. Online poker, sports betting, casinos out of town. I discovered it 2 years ago when our credit card was declined. There were dozens of charges. He promised me it was over, that he just got carried away. I believed him." She gave a bitter laugh. "I was a fool." The floor seemed to tilt under me. All those desperate phone calls, all those pleas for money, furniture, certifications, unexpected bills. Suddenly they wore a new face. "Did he stop?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "For a while," she admitted. "But 8 months ago, it started again. This time, he hid it better. Accounts I couldn't access, cash advances, and the mortgage payments." Her voice faltered. The realization slammed into me. "You mean the money I was sending?" She nodded miserably. "Some of it went to real expenses, yes, but much of it went straight into bets. He told me he had a system, that one big win would fix everything. Instead, we're drowning. The mortgage is 4 months behind. The credit cards are maxed. He even took out another home equity line without telling me." My chest tightened, each word slicing deeper. Years of sacrifice, all funneled into a pit of cards and dice. Does he admit it? I asked quietly. No, she whispered. He insists he's fine, that every setback is temporary, that you'll bail us out again if it gets bad enough. The rage that rose in me was hot, almost dizzying. My sleepless nights, my failing health, my empty savings, all of it feeding his addiction. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Karen, for everything, for how I treated you, for excluding you, for being blind. But I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. For the first time, I saw Hannah stripped of her arrogance, not a polished daughter of wealth, but a frightened woman, watching her world collapse. And for the first time, I realized the enemy wasn't just her, it was my own son. Daniel arrived at my door just after dark, his knock sharp, impatient. I opened it to find his face drawn tight, his eyes restless. Without waiting for an invitation, he pushed past me. Why were you meeting with Hannah? He demanded, pacing the room like a cornered animal. She asked me to. I said calmly. She told me the truth about your gambling. He froze, then forced a bitter laugh. So, now she's feeding you lies, to make herself look like a victim. It isn't a lie, I answered. The charges, the loans, the money I bled myself dry to provide you gambled with it. His voice rose. It's not like that. I had a system. One win, and it would have turned around. You don't get it, Mom. This was for us. For the future. I stepped closer, my voice steady, though my chest ached. For the future? I worked myself into pneumonia so you could keep placing bets. I was paying for your illusion while you let Hannah tell me I didn't belong at Christmas. Daniel's face flushed crimson. You act like I forced you. You chose to help. You always said family sacrifices. Don't twist it now because you regret it. I shook my head slowly. I didn't sacrifice, Daniel. I enabled. I taught you that love was measured in money, and you let that lesson consume you. His jaw clenched, his fists balled. Fine. We'll figure it out ourselves. But don't expect to be part of this family. When you abandon us. Abandon. The word cut sharper than any blade. He stormed out, the slam of the door rattling the walls. I stood by the window, watching his car disappear into the night. My Christmas lights reflected in the glass, soft and steady. My heart was breaking, but beneath the fracture was something stronger. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing myself if I stayed. Christmas morning came with a soft dusting of snow, the kind that turned Oak Ridge into a picture postcard. For years, I'd spent this day anxiously preparing dishes for Daniel and Hannah's gatherings, careful not to say the wrong thing, careful to be invisible at my own son's table. This year, there was no invitation, only silence. And yet, for the first time in decades, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. I carried a plate of ginger cookies, my mother's old recipe, into Grace's kitchen, where a dozen volunteers bustled, serving food to seniors who had nowhere else to go. The air was filled with laughter, carols playing faintly from an old radio. As I ladled soup into bowls, one woman squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for remembering us." That simple gratitude pierced deeper than any of Daniel's careless thank yous ever had. Later that evening, I returned home to find Olivia waiting on my porch with 2 mugs of cocoa. Together we admired the string of white lights she'd helped me hang, glowing gently against the snow. "Your house looks beautiful," she said. I smiled, seeing it through her eyes, not grand, not extravagant, but warm. Mine. Inside, I placed the small living tree by the window, its ornaments catching the light. On the mantel sat the gift Nathan had given me after our concert, a collection of poetry. I opened it at random and read a line aloud, the words steadying me. I was no longer a shadow in someone else's story. Somewhere across town, Daniel and Hannah were likely seated at Walter and Diane's lavish table, the crystal glasses and catered meals masking the rot underneath. Perhaps they would talk about me, perhaps not. But I no longer cared. I poured myself tea, settled into my armchair, and watched the snow fall outside. The house was quiet, yes, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The final image was simple yet powerful. The glow of my own Christmas lights, reflecting in the window, a reminder that sometimes the brightest warmth comes not from a crowded table, but from choosing yourself.